Hello and welcome to Talking Books. I'm Jill de Villiers. Over the course of 50 years, Christo Wiese never shied away from sailing close to the wind. His calculated risks paid off, making him one of South Africa's most successful businessmen and the richest man in the country. That was until he encountered Steinhoff. Joining me now is business journalist TJ Strydom to discuss his unauthorized biography, Christo Wiese, Risk and Riches. Welcome, TJ. Thank you so much for coming in and chatting to me.
Hi.
Let's start with the launch of your book in Cape Town. Very unexpectedly, it's an unauthorized biography, but he pitched up.
Yes,
Tell
he
me
did.
about that. Was that a big surprise to you?
Well, strangely, I did invite him. So, and he did respond in the positive that he would come. But you sort of think that maybe something else, pops up for a billionaire, and maybe he just doesn't come to the book launch of his unauthorized biography. But he came and it really changed the evening. He responded to questions. For me, it was a little bit uncomfortable to have him in the room because obviously people ask me questions about the book often, and then I respond because when I'm in the room, usually I'm the one that knows the story the best. But I mean, with him in the room, obviously he knows the story best. So I had to. I held back a little bit. Let me put it that way. I didn't change my story. I just referred to him, and the same with the host was James Brent Stein, who wrote the Steinhoff book, and he also referred to Wiese, or deferred. I think we should say. Yes.
But you did approach him initially to ask him to work on the biography with you. Tell me about that initial meeting and how it came about that it became an unauthorized biography.
So I've never met Wiese personally before. I spoke to him over the phone a few times as a journalist, and I've seen him at public gatherings. I approached him. Obviously, the first prize would have been an authorized biography where he bears all. But we had about a 90-minute meeting in his offices in Paro, and I mean, it was very colorful. He's a very entertaining guy. He told a lot of stories, anecdotes, and that interview itself helped me fill in a few gaps. And afterwards, he said, "Well, I should send him a proposal of what I'm planning to do," and then afterwards he said he was, and I think legitimately too busy to work on a biography with me, and in a sense it did suit me because then I could decide what goes where, and by that time I'd already done a lot of research, so I had a good idea of what I wanted to write, and he's been in the public eye for 50 years, more than 50. I mean, there's just so much out there, and there's so much publicly available information, and so many people willing to do interviews, lots also not willing to do interviews about him. So it was relatively easy to put the story together without him. I think his version of the story would be interesting if it does come out eventually. So
with the sifting, was there a lot that you had to leave out, or did most of your information make it into the book?
No, I think the book would have been a lot thicker or more bulky had I put everything in that I had. For me, it was if something makes a point and the point is already made, I sort of don't try and repeat the same thing. As I say, I try to get as many colourful anecdotes in there as I can, and then to have sort of a golden thread through of what he did over his business lifetime. And I mean, for all we know, it's not over yet. I just think the Steinhoff debacle is an interesting time to take stock again. I mean, he's still the biggest shareholder in ShopRite. He still, in effect, controls that company, even though there's a deal on the table now where they're trying to sell that control on to other shareholders and give him a larger ordinary stake in the company. So, I mean, there might be a few chapters.
Almost lost that as well to Steinhoff.
Oh, very interestingly, yes. So very close to, it was a matter of a few weeks. So Steinhoff collapsed in December 2017, and collapsed, maybe it's not fair, the company is still trading and still there, but the share price collapsed because it suddenly became clear that this company isn't what they were saying they are. And when long-time CEO Marcus Jooste stepped down, that was sort of the thing that pushed it, after a lot of negative press a few months before, and sort of a building and a gradual slide in the share price, pushed it over the edge. And that obviously in a very short time changed Wiese's shareholding in the company, and also what his shareholding is worth. So before that, I think he held a stake of about 24%, but because the stake was very leveraged, investment banks could sell his shares to then recoup their losses, and that they did. By the time, by the early December, those margin loans were called in, and they sold the stake down to, he now holds about 6%, I think, at last count. So yes, very quickly things changed, and you can put a number on it. It's billions of dollars that was lost for Wiese, but he was on the cusp of making another deal, and I mean, it was a matter of a few a few formalities to sell the control of Shoprite into what was then Steinhoff Africa Retail, which is today again called Pepkor, and that in effect would have put Shoprite into what is in effect a mess. I mean, Shoprite would have maybe plugged the hole, because it's a very good business, would have plugged the hole in all of this debt. But I mean, if you go and look at Steinhoff's the hole in their finances and what Shoprite is worth, I mean, it would have just disappeared in there. And I mean, there are good businesses still in the Steinhoff group. So Pepkor is a good example. The question now is how they will restructure the business, which sort of maybe gets rid of the European and the US problem businesses, and also lots of the off-balance sheet entities there that caused all the problems, and maybe retain a South African part of the business and go with that from strength to strength.
Now, the Steinhoff is part of the book. There's also a lot of other things that you talk about in the book, his whole life and businesses that he was involved in. Your initial title that you had in mind was in Afrikaans kansvatter,
Yes.
which is risk taker, but it's a little bit more than that.
Almost
It's the chancer, yes.
Yeah.
But he's taken a lot of risks in his life. So how would you describe those risks?
Oh, well, I mean, some of them are breathtaking. It's things that you wouldn't think. I mean, I think Steinhoff is the most recent example, but at the age of 73, 74, to then put such a large part of your wealth into one stock, that's definitely risky. I mean, by the time I retire, I would probably be in bonds and just sitting waiting for my monthly payment. But I mean, over the years, he bought the diamond mine shortly after the Soweto uprisings. I mean, that's a big risk to take at the time. Early 80s, he pushed into retail in South Africa, and the 80s in South African retail. It wasn't an easy time. I mean, if you look at OK Bazaars over that time, it was difficult to trade. Checkers in that time was difficult to trade, and I mean, eventually, by taking the risk and taking control of Pep stores, and eventually forming Pepkor, he then managed to get both of those businesses, both OK Bazaars and Checkers, under his wing, or under Pepkor's wing.
And other risks he took, like getting loans from offshore?
Yeah, no. So interestingly, the early 1980s, I think, and that's very interesting. When he took control of Pepkor, in those days, the interest rate in South Africa was rising, trying to get around that, and borrowing overseas, which at the time, I mean, the rand was stable against the dollar. It seemed like a clever move, and in the first year they made a tidy profit off that. But soon thereafter, political unrest in South Africa started taking a toll, and the economy just turned in general. So the gold price came off, and suddenly they had to pay back a much larger amount than what they borrowed initially, just because they had rands and they were earning in rands, but they had to pay back dollars. So then hard currency, I think there were some very serious lessons learned there, and yeah, but by the mid-1980s, Pepkor was in serious trouble. And they had to list Pep stores separately and list ShopRite separately, selling 20% of both of those two businesses to get on a better footing, and then go through lots of dilutive rights issues and I mean lots of measures to try and right-foot those businesses, which eventually they did come right. But very much that was a risk taken.
Yeah. So you say as well in the book that he's done so much that just one of his things somebody else would regard as a life's work and a life's achievement. Can you just elaborate a little bit more on the many businesses? You read the book and you see it's this name, Greaterman, Stutterfords, it's all of these names just pop up. It's just the mine, Lanzerac.
I mean, strangely enough, a business like Invicta, the industrial goods business, that on its own would have been a biography for someone. I mean, just his involvement there, or Tradehold, which started as retail in the UK, but it's now sort of more a property company. I mean, I don't even think I mentioned it in a book, but he was the chairman of Mango starting out, the low cost airline. So there's so many things like that, and I think if you take one thing away from the book, he had a lot of balls in the air most of the time. So I think there was sort of a satisfaction from making deals and being involved in deals, and probably the negotiation process and maybe bettering the other guy, getting one up. And I think that's the thing that drove him, probably more than anything else.
Yeah, the deal making thing. Do you think that he might have made enemies during his deal making?
Plenty. Sadly, not all of them wanted to talk to me. Otherwise, the book would have been this thick. But no, definitely. I mean, it's one example that I use is they were him and Johan Rupert. They were basically going for the same offshore diamond company in the late 90s. And though at the book launch, Wiese said no, there's no bad blood between him and Johan Rupert. I mean, lots of people I spoke to off the record beg to differ. So I mean, who to believe, I don't know. But if you read that incident, it would be, for me, it would be difficult to forgive someone, even though it's 20 years later. So, and that's the thing. If you're willing to, if you love the deals that much, then maybe you're willing to have fewer friends.
Yeah. And then you have all the power and the money that comes with.
Absolutely, with that. and the opportunity to make more deals.
TJ, thank you so much for coming in and chatting to us.
Thanks, Jill.
Okay, so my guest today is author TJ Strydom, and the book is Christo Wiese, Risk and Riches. And that was it for this edition of Talking Books. Thanks for watching.